You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics. National speaker Timmerie Millington has been a passionate advocate for life as long as she can remember, helping Gen X through Z answer the call to true feminism and authentic manhood. Timmerie holds a master's degree in biblical theology, and she covers this week's hottest stories from a Catholic worldview. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie.
It is great to be with you. I have with me today Father Robert Spitzer of the Magis Center, president and founder. We are going to be diving into some very topical issues here at the beginning of 2020. We'll be looking at abortion in the upcoming year and what we might expect in terms of some Supreme Court decisions and what the layout of the land will be after such a shocking year in 2019 with so many laws being passed in completely opposite directions on the abortion issue, either allowing access to abortion all the way through 9 months of a woman's pregnancy or stopping it much earlier on, such as before or immediately after there's a heartbeat detected. So we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about this shocking decline that continues to be the trend across the world with regard to population. We're seeing that Japan has seen the lowest birth rates on record in their nation. And also close to home for me here in California, Father Robert Spitzer as well, there's been a mass exodus of people leaving. So many people leaving, fewer people are even coming into our great Golden State. So without further ado, Father Robert Spitzer, thanks for being with us today.
Great. Always to be back with you, Timmerie.
So I want to look at this abortion landscape. I think that 2019 was a major year for the abortion debate. And here's why. And I want to get your thoughts on it. People did not realize that because of the Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade, that abortion has been legal on a federal level through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy. So when all of a sudden New York and Chicago and other states started passing laws that wrote this into their constitution, people were shocked. They didn't realize that you could abort a baby this late. And so what happened is I feel like a lot of people were forced to kind of make more of a decision on what they thought about abortion at the same time as pro-life laws, such as banning abortion after a heartbeat is detected, was kind of too soon for some people. And so I feel like 2019, more people, we'll use the word woke, were being woken up to needing to take some sort of a stance here. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we are at a kind of an interesting extreme, and I think it's almost a tipping point for culture. I think on the one hand, you have a trend of people who are recognizing that abortion really is the killing of an innocent person. And we have so many new technologies that enable us to see in utero now. You can see that baby and trying to present that reality to people on a kind of a massive scale is a great development that's getting through to people. I think great films that have come out just in the last year and a half really have also presented the more grisly side of abortion, but also with it the reality of the life in the womb. And I think that's been a second, area. A third area has just been an awakening of people to a general decline in respect for life culturally. And, just seeing the massive rise in suicide rates, if that doesn't make alarm bells go off, do you? I don't know what will. So when you start combining all of these elements, there is a good side, that's come out in recent years, not to mention the constituency of the Supreme Court and a variety of other things. I do think we have a good chance of maybe being at a cultural crossroad here, where we might go in a pro-life direction. So there's hope there. Alternatively, you can almost see the devil in his death throng, know. And he's, with such extreme vigor, we are seeing resistance to
shout your abortion. Michelle Williams at the Golden Globes, you name it. There's just darkness in terms of shouting that abortion decision.
Oh yeah, and so we're at a crossroads. We're definitely in a cultural battle, but I do think there's a lot of really good omens out there, or I would call them providential manifestations out there that really show a possibility of a cultural crossroad, a turn in the culture, and maybe we might be going in a pro-life direction now. I think the extreme bills, by the way, that were happening on the state levels in New York and Illinois and all that, I really think it just scared people so much that it caused a reaction, just wanting to assert we just can't keep killing off people, killing off innocent babies, and that recognition of the innocence of that life and the reality of that life is getting more profoundly recognized.
This is my challenge to people. We're going to dive into what we're looking at in the Supreme Court in 2020 over abortion, because I think it will be not a huge decision maker, but it'll start to unravel in some way some of the restrictions placed on allowing further pro-life laws. We'll get to that in a second. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That is Father Robert Spitzer. But one of the things I challenge you is we are at a point in history where abortion is looked at as a necessary evil. It's not looked at any longer as it used to be as, oh, well, nothing's wrong with abortion. People recognize, and especially when you look at the younger generations, they're more pro-life than ever before. Yeah. But as they get older, that moral relativism kicks in so intensely that people who I knew who were incredibly pro-life, and even today are very pro-life in terms of they would never engage in abortion, but they begin to have sympathy for making the decision. Now, it's one thing, I think, to have sympathy for someone who's gone through an abortion, but it's wrong to have sympathy to the point of almost supporting the decision or justifying the decision.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just, how can you ever, under any circumstances, try to justify, killing an innocent human being in utero? I mean, I don't care what the social pressures are. You just can't kill a human being. I mean, can you imagine if we applied the same thing to, extra utero life? The baby is there 1 day old, but you go, this is a financial and social burden. I guess, just to alleviate the burden, I'll just kill that human being. Of course, the outcry would be legitimately there. Yeah. But why do we make this false distinction just because that life is in the womb? That therefore, that justifies the unjustifiable, the killing of an innocent for no other reason than convenience or social pressure.
And I think that was precisely the tipping point of last year. It allowed the opportunity. Okay, so people aren't okay with abortion at 9 months. Well, if you're not okay with abortion at 9 months, what's the difference with 6 months? What's the difference with 3 months? What's the difference with 2 months gestation? It really allowed us to challenge people. You're just making a decision based on a level of development that is inappropriate. And again, you can listen to some of the shows we did last year. We help you to really use those tools to call people out who didn't like how far the abortion laws went last year. And speaking of abortion laws, so this year, 2020, the Supreme Court last year agreed that in 2020, this coming March, they're going to hear a case surrounding the Louisiana abortion law that back in 2014 ended up making a case that abortion clinics needed to have an admitting privilege within 30 miles at a local hospital. So if something went wrong, they needed to have an immediate conversation that was opening up. They knew exactly where they were sending their patients so that no time was wasted in the case of an emergency. Well, of course, Planned Parenthood, NARAL, and other pro-abortion groups have pointed to Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which is a 1992 Supreme Court decision, saying that, well, this puts an undue burden on women to access abortion, when in reality, abortion clinics just aren't willing to make those relationships. And in fact, some hospitals don't want to make those relationships
absolutely
as well. And so what's interesting, Father Spitzer, you and I were talking about this before. In 2016, the Supreme Court heard a similar case out of Texas. And in fact, they struck the Texas law down, saying that these were undue burdens placed on women because so many abortion clinics were going to close because they weren't meeting basic medical and health standards. So why is the Supreme Court taking this up in 2020? A lot of people are expecting that this is going to change a little bit of what the rule has been with Casey versus Planned Parenthood.
A redefinition of undue burden would be terrific, because if they say, well, really, what is an undue burden? And then they establish a set of criteria which would allow the Louisiana law to not only remain, but to be justified by a Supreme Court precedent, then I think you're going to see a lot of laws like Louisiana's law. It'll be just patterned along those lines, or according to some prescription that the Supreme Court comes up with, that would loosen the standard in Casey. But any loosening of the standard in Casey would be terrific, because that will allow more strict standards to correlate abortion with access to hospitals close by, which in turn would obviously close a lot of abortion clinics, but also make, pave the way maybe for an even more drastic decision regarding abortion in the future, in terms of putting it right in the hands of the states where it belongs.
This is a great news now. Some people are saying this is going to be the Supreme Court case on abortion. Hold your horses. I don't think we're there yet. No. In fact, the prediction is that the Supreme Court's going to kind of punt this and send it back to the Fifth Circuit and say, you know what, the decision of the Fifth Circuit stands. Louisiana can proceed with the law, but in order to do that, we need to lessen a little bit of Casey versus Planned Parenthood and that undue burden. In the meantime, we have over 207 members of Congress who have signed a, quote, friend of the court briefing, essentially asking for there to be very close attention placed on this Louisiana case going to the Supreme Court. So it's neat to see that we have many of our legislators speaking up and saying, this matters, and the argument over undue burden is unfortunately being used inappropriately to justify abortion. And actually, we could look at it just from a medical perspective to lessen basic health standards for women's health care. Oh, yeah.
It goes both ways. So, yeah, it's more abortions, but in order to do that, you have to definitely lessen the standards for health care for women and access to emergency help, medical assistance if something goes wrong.
That's Father Robert Spitzer. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Father, I want to get into a couple of case studies out of California and Japan having to do with what the demographers are saying about this major concern over population. Overall, though, I want to get your response to this. We are seeing across the world, not just in developing countries, that birth rates are declining. Population is declining. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I think the reason that they're declining is, number one, Japan has advocated abortion for a long time. And then you've got China next door with a single-child policy with mandatory abortion thereafter. Now that seems to be loosening up, to a two-child policy. But we have had just careless, reckless disregard for human life, especially preborn human life, for a long, long time. And now it's coming out. Secondly, the materialism of our culture and the ego-comparative nature of our culture has definitely, put the priorities away from children, away from bringing a new, transcendent, unique, lovable soul into the world destined for eternal life. We want to put now that aside in order to get the new Mercedes or to get more time to go on another trip or whatever it may be. But we are no longer sacrificing materialistic and ego-comparative needs in order to have children, to bring these in this new generation into the world with an immortal soul. Instead, we have decided the car is more important, the trip's more important, and that's a secondary, sign of really a decaying culture. What's not even ironic, what's utterly consistent and what we should expect is that, well, if you have a culture that has decayed from within and sees no value in life or bringing life into the world or making sacrifices for the sake of new life, if you've got a culture like that, I can assure you that you can expect that the population rate will go down. But what is going to be the result of that? Well, I think there's going to be several things. The first thing is your economy cannot sustain itself. Even if you have like total robotic culture, you're going to have to start bringing people in massive waves of immigration in order to support that economy. And so you're eventually what's going to happen in Japan is you're going to have this huge, group of people who are immigrants to sort of take over the economy and to produce within that culture. And there's going to be nothing, that the Japanese can do except to bring those people in. It's like what France is experiencing right now with its immigrants and the Gastarbeiters in Germany. So you're going to have basically a sort of an interesting sort of cultural takeover, as it were. And so that's a consequence. But if this starts going globally, now it's not going to happen in Africa, and it's not going to happen in Latin America. Right now, you're not going to see these radical declines. But if this starts happening globally, what you're going to find is that you're going to have an implosion, an economic implosion, similar to the one predicted by Elon Musk and others, which I think will be, unfortunately, a sort of not an Armageddon, but pretty darn close to it. I don't know how, we're going to be able to fulfill what our needs will be in the future. I mean, we'll have to turn to India, to Africa, to Latin America and other places to get the requisite population for economic sustainability.
That's Father Robert Spitzer. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Don't miss an episode, or you maybe aren't able to join us with this full episode. You can head over to relevantradio.com to listen to episodes, or you can learn more about our guests and find ways to subscribe to Trending at radiotrending.com. As we're talking about Japan, so Japan is facing the greatest birth decline. They've got the lowest birth record in the history of their country. It fell nearly 6% after years of trying to continuously try to pick this up. So they've been trying to do things just like Italy and other places are trying so hard to increase the birth rate, support marriages. It's sad because this is what we're fighting for. And when people look at what's happening in Japan, one of the things they're pointing to is the burden placed on women to have to do everything. You have to have your career and your home life perfect. And the reality is that Japan is a testament to this. They're saying, women in Japan have this idea of having a perfect home. So trying to do both, well, we're just not going to. And so they're opting out of having children. And I think that
in Italy, they're opting out of getting married.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this points to people are saying, I cannot do everything. And so in one respect, although I don't agree with abortion, we don't agree with contraception, I do respect the fact that people are saying, I can't do it all. And that's the point, I think, in history that we're at. So now how are you and I going to really position ourselves to be able to do what's right?
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem because now you're going to have to do a cultural reversal. In order to, if you want to bring Japan back and you want to bring the birth rate up in Japan, you're going to have to reverse a cultural mentality which is almost set in stone. And it's, I think, nigh on impossible. As far as I can determine, the Japanese people per se is just going to gradually diminish until it dies away. I just don't think there will really be a significant Japanese people into the future. They They don't have population sustainability in any realistic way, and I don't see any real change in the future. I mean, in China, they tried to stop the one-child policy because right now, of course, they have no women in China.
I think it's 30 million unmarriable men.
Yes, yeah.
30 million unmarriable men who cannot find people. And we're talking about people in their prime years to marry and have children. And, you know, I think the whole crisis in California, we're seeing in California, more people are leaving the country than there are people being born and migrating in. So we are declining in population here in California. Yeah. And what stands out to me about both of these from a distinctly Christian perspective is that the reason people are leaving California have to do with homelessness, safety surrounding homelessness, the drug problem. People are leaving over financial reasons and taxes. It's not family friendly. Well, the culture isn't family friendly in Japan. It's not family friendly in California. What do we need to do from a cultural perspective, from a personal perspective, to make sure that we are welcoming children, that we are encouraging other people to live in a way that is welcoming marriage and family? Yeah.
Again, you have to almost do a cultural reversal. I hate to say it, but in California, there's just been an enormous propaganda effort to persuade everybody to be what I would call marriage unfriendly and child unfriendly, or what you would call family unfriendly. Now, the massive propaganda effort is working. We can see that there are a lot of kids who are almost brainwashed into believing this mentality, and they say it, the slogans, unthinkingly. I've heard this just rolling off the lips of women who really have PhDs,
I know,
or PsyDs, and they're absolutely convinced sloganeers. But, you look at it and you go, this doesn't make any sense from the vantage point of first of all, what produces true human happiness? Well, if it's true love that's committed love within a family, then what we're dealing with is a bunch of convinced people who are in an incipient, if not a full-blown state of despair.
I do have to throw this in there because what you just said had so much value, that people who are educated today have been so brainwashed. And it's interesting because, there are people who are so brainwashed, and man, they can spout out fact after fact after fact. They can go rounds and rounds in a debate, but nothing they are saying is true. And I was talking to my husband about this the other day. I have a hard time debating with them because sometimes I feel like, man, you are so smart, but you're so wrong. And so I just go, I'm not even going to go there. I, at a certain point, can go round and round with you, but then I'm just going to walk away because I'm not doing anything by kind of talking to you who is a sponge of data, yet do not know the real world. And I think that this is a challenge for each of us. We need to live by example because I see a lot of people who are terrified of diving into that verbal battle right now. Yeah,
I would say, if you don't want to get into the fact spouting and things of that nature, and I think you can go at that pretty significantly. The old idea of the population explosion is going to lead to a scarcity of resources, the old Malthusian prediction. Malthus has been proven dead wrong generation after generation after generation. Now, people like Paul Zane Pilzer pointed it out a long time ago in that book, Unlimited Wealth, and showed that technologies and communications, et cetera, the improvements in those things have always led to a net increase in wealth per capita, even with an exploding economy. Now, yes, in certain countries in Africa and so forth, yes, it has not gone well for that kind of correlation. But if we take care of those people and we give them the education, the economic basis on which to base this principle of unlimited wealth, the population explosion myth, you can explode it.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we need to concentrate on incipient despair, emptiness, loneliness, alienation, and guilt. It's all over the place in our culture. And where is it coming from? It's coming from the fact that we don't have any true love or any hope that would come not just from faith, but in values that lead to committed love in our culture. We're so darn superficial in this culture. We've lost the sense of true committed love. We've lost the sense of faith and the hope that comes from that faith, and the combination of the two that leads to great families and that leads to real love. You almost want to turn on Leave It to Beaver so you can just see at least, the sanity of the pre-insane culture that we have today.
It's so true, and I love to turn back to old black and white movies because it's so peaceful in comparison to what we're facing today. We'll be right back on Trending with Timmerie with Father Robert Spitzer.
Timmerie will be right back. Send her a tweet at Timmerie. That's TIMMERIE. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. You can tweet me at Timmerie, that's TIMMERIE, or contact me on Instagram or Facebook. Same credentials there. What I want to hear your thoughts on are the Golden Globes. I mean, who really watches the Golden Globes anymore? But everyone has seen this clip of Ricky Gervais. We're going to play it in just a minute, so don't worry if you're not caught up. We're going to play it here. First, a message from our sponsors. Solidarity HealthShare is simple to help pay for affordable, quality health care. They enable the community to share in each other's eligible medical expenses. You choose a doctor that you want to see. Even integrative and alternative medical treatments are eligible. Solidarity HealthShare helps pay for NaPro Technology and costs associated with natural family planning. Solidarity HealthShare is dedicated to both faith and your healthcare. Information is available at solidarityhealthshare.org. That's solidarityhealthshare.org. I'm here with Father Robert Spitzer, founder and president of the Magis Center. Father Spitzer, I want you to listen to this clip here from the Golden Globes.
Okay.
Ricky Gervais, a comedian, British comedian, was the MC for the night. And man, did he just backslap everyone in Hollywood. Let's go ahead and cue up that clip right now.
Game with a morning show. Time, who cares? Oh. Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show. A superb drama, yeah. A superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you? So, if you do win an award tonight, don't use it as a platform to make a political speech, right? You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. Most of you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. So, if you win, right, come up, accept your little award, thank your agent and your God, and... So... It's already 3 hours long. Right, let's do the first award. The first award.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so this was the intro to the Golden Globes. I mean, we've got people like Tom Hanks. You should have seen his face. He was so offended. Did they listen? No, they still made their political speeches. I mean, we had Michelle Williams up there talking about abortion and choice, basically an ad for Planned Parenthood.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in an election year, this is what you could expect. But boy, so many of the comments Ricky Gervais made were so true. And I think that's why people have, across the board, been in favor of what he said.
Yeah, I think everybody knows exactly what he said. You don't know anything more about politics than the rest of us, maybe less. That's my paraphrase. And I think that is so true. I think there's a superficiality in the world of Hollywood that, despite the seeming profundity of many of these dramas, I must tell you, the superficiality just reigns supreme. I've never seen an ego-comparative culture so, on steroids as in Hollywood. They're hardly in a position to sit as judge and jury over culture, politics, or anything else.
Well, we treat Hollywood as basically the royalty of the United States, and we go to them for every sort of guidance, whether it's on depression or who to vote for as president. Yet there's so much hypocrisy. I mean, you think people would have woken up after what happened and what was exposed 2 years ago in the Me Too movement. And so here, let's say 2 years ago now, everyone's showing up to the Golden Globes. Was it 2 years ago or last year? I think it was 2 years ago. They show up in, I think they're all wearing black or something in solidarity. And now here we are. I mean, I was so surprised by this. Apple TV came out, and Ricky Gervais mentions this with this show, a morning show, featuring Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. And basically, the whole beginning of the show is set on Jennifer Aniston's co-host. It ended up coming out that he was another perpetrator. He had abused someone that worked there at the morning show, and so they had to fire him. And so she's having to react to this practically live on television. She's got a new co-host in Reese Witherspoon. And I just think it's so hypocritical, even how they handle the show. You guys are making a show about the Me Too movement, and even how you handle it on your TV show isn't good. And then Ricky Gervais calls them out. And you guys have sweatshops that you're running in other countries.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's the hypocrisy. And, get on your private jet and, while you're campaigning against global warming. Are you kidding me? Your carbon imprint is through the ceiling, and I mean, it just, the hypocrisies are just one after the next. You preach a great game, about supporting just causes, which I think is good. Support just causes. However, when you got your tax person out there trying to make sure that you don't pay one scrap more of taxes, and you've got the best tax accountants in the world to make sure that nothing additional goes to those very programs. I'm just blown away by the two-sidedness or the almost two-facedness of the culture of Hollywood.
You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. That is Father Robert Spitzer. So when Ricky Gervais is talking here at the Golden Globes, he insults everyone about their little awards and, be quiet. You didn't even go to school. He's telling me, without saying it, he's basically saying, don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics. Just stay away from it. And there's some truth to what he's saying that all of us, for just a moment, can actually take into our own lives, I think. We laugh at what is true usually, or sometimes we laugh at what makes us feel uncomfortable. And I think that we can use a whole lot more just common courtesy by sometimes not going there and by living by example so that other people feel welcome around us.
Now, I think that's, almost there is a protocol and even a good, sometimes silence is golden. And I do think you can stay away from, most of these issues without giving a lecture. If you want to thank the Lord, or thank your family, or something for the award or, something of that nature, or you just want to say, I want to thank my parents for the values that I received or, my church for what I received. I think that's okay to do. But to give a lecture is completely inappropriate, especially since so many of the lecturers are hardly in a position to do it.
One of the things that stood out with how this clip has gone viral is if you look at the millennial and even Gen Z now, the iGen, they love just authenticity. They love rawness. And, sometimes they shock me because they curse so much. I mean, my generation and the generation below me, and just the foul words. And that's actually consistent with research about this specific age group because they want what's real. And so they use really raw words. And I think that this is part of the reason why people loved what Ricky Gervais said. It was raw. It was real. He may have been a comedian, but as Jimmy G, our sound engineer, and everyone behind the scenes here was saying before the show, in his own British way, he was able to say what he's actually thinking here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad he said it, but unfortunately no one took his advice. But this is part of the whole culture. I mean, we are the culture of appearances. We're the culture of facades. We half the time don't care about the hypocrisies that underlie it. It's just we are, level two turns into hypocrisy, facade, appearance, and it never gets to the reality of love. It never gets to the reality of our transcendent nature, never gets to the reality of what really makes a difference in life and what will have a long-standing value and legacy. Never gets to really, well, what principles do we operate according to anyway, besides the fact that it's now in at Hollywood, and it just never gets there. So, well, in the culture of appearances, so long as you can cloak the hypocrisy or you can cloak, the murdering of innocence as, something that's really good and you should celebrate it, as dear Michelle did there.
I have to tell you something else she said, Father. So Michelle Williams not only talks about her abortion, talks about choice, she then starts talking about voting in this upcoming election. And she, at one point, talks about how you basically have to vote, quote, with your own self-interest. And man, those words, thank you, Michelle Williams, for saying that, because you are showing that you and only you are at the center of the world, and that's the only reason you vote, rather than for the greater good. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, well, at least that wasn't hypocritical. There is the full truth of inauthenticity and egocentricity, narcissism writ large, said very rawly and straightly. Vote with your own self-interest. Yeah. And maybe there's more truth to what she's saying than what we ourselves are kind of examining on our own. Do we just act with our own self-interest? Do we vote with our own self-interest? Do we make most of our decisions with our own self-interest? And, remember, you're supposed to love yourself as you love your neighbor. Well, are we loving ourselves enough to go beyond kind of our immediate desires? Well, here's the problem is, all love has to go outside of itself. The love of self without having love of neighbor will never be love. And I mean, that'll be pure narcissism. So I do think, it's like even the love of a couple for one another, right? Was Kierkegaard's famous little story where it's almost like Narcissus, the two lovers are gazing into each other's eyes, but they become the pools of Narcissus. They don't ever go beyond themselves, and if they don't go beyond themselves, you have a huge problem, right, is that the love is unsustainable. They fall into the pool of themselves alone, and it has to go out to children. That couple needs to go out to the world beyond, and that's what's not happening.
You can listen to more of Trending via the podcast on iTunes or the iHeartRadio app, where you can share your favorite episodes. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
Major study came out showing that children behave 800 times worse when they're in front of their moms. It was a fake study. Articles have been kind of all over the internet about this. I think it's really comical because, I don't have kids, but I see my friends all the time, and they're always talking about, man, my kids behave so bad sometimes in front of me. And then I see them, interacting with other people, and they're better. We're going to dive into this because I think it really points to the importance and the love and the power that the mom has within the home. With me on today's show is Father Robert Spitzer of the Magis Center. Initial thoughts on this one, Father?
Well, that cuts both ways. There's love and responsibility. So I do think in one sense the power of the mom, who's so lovable, so accepting of the child feels free to just act up in front of the mother. The difficulty is, even though they have a sense that they can, and they have to sort of dress up a little bit better when they're in front of total strangers or in front of family friends, the point is at some point, you do have to sort of have a little bit of responsibility mixed in with the love. Love is not pure acceptance of any kind of conduct. Love is also has a guiding hand which says, you just can't act up like this in front of me. You can't be disrespectful to me. And I mean, boy, if we ever did that to my mother in front of my father, yikes, I don't even want to think of what would have happened to us. But I have to tell you, though, I do think, love and responsibility go together. Love is not just being accepted and pampered. Love is also, you got to buck up and be a human being and be contributive.
I have 3 thoughts on this that I kind of want to dive into. People are laughing at this because it's true. Not the statistic of children behaving 800 times worse, but there's so much credit to this. There are all these memes about this as well. I think first and foremost, the fact that a child misbehaves more in front of the mom sees the best of the best and the worst of the worst, just like we see in our families, right? We can show our worst in front of the closest people to us because we know they're going to forgive us, they're going to love us anyways. So that points to the unconditional love that a mother should have, the safety, the trust that the mother gives. So that's a beautiful thing, and it shows how her love is supposed to be so important to that child knows it's loved unconditionally. And that's where the child learns to test its limits of unconditional love. So that's the power and I think the really good side of it. I think the other 2 points I think are something for us to consider. The second one is I think there's a lot of loose parenting where moms go, well, I'm just going to let my kid do whatever. And I'm not saying in the respect of like just letting them free play. I don't think there's enough free play for the poor kids anymore. Yeah. It's just that they're going to allow bad behavior anytime in front of them because they're tired. They don't want to go through with it, which kind of hits on the third point of because moms are less present than they ever used to be in the history of the world with their children. It used to be that children were taught by their moms, that they, did work in the fields with their moms and their dads. Because of this, we're also seeing children act up and behave poorly in front of their moms so that they can just get attention, even if it means a spanking or a correction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unfortunate part of the culture. I mean, you've identified a huge area here of, it takes time to really form a child in the security of knowing that they're loved. And if you don't spend enough time with your kids, if you're not present to your kids, or if you're just so tired when you are present to your kids and you're emotionally not present to your kids, that kid is very likely to suspect, if not fully appropriate the thought, I'm not lovable, or I'm not as loved as this other kid, or maybe my mom just thinks more of things around her than she does of me. And all those things are very dangerous notions for forming a very insecure ego, which will act out not only in childhood, but in adulthood as well.
I think the bottom line, and this is a message for all of us to know, and it's not just kids that want this, but, we crave human connection. We see by this, study that was a joke, kids want their moms. Yeah. They want their moms. And I remember hearing someone say recently, it was a few months ago, they were asking a question of, hey, would your kid rather $20 or to spend time with you for an evening? And the parent was shocked when they found out the kid actually preferred to spend time with the parent rather than the $20. And it was kind of like an angst type of teenager, that age, whether they're young or old. The bottom line is that children crave to be around their parents, even if they're giving you attitude, whatever it might be. They want that discipline. They want that guidance. They want the rules. And that kind of brings in the fatherly role as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, children really behave differently in front of their fathers because they see their fathers as a figure of discipline.
Oh, yeah, definitely the case. I mean, and certainly in my household and the household of all of my friends. And I've seen it, just one time, I was at a friend's house in Washington, D.C., and the mother went out and, say, okay, kids, time to come in for dinner. They keep playing on the tire and doing everything. And, okay, kids, come. After about the 5th time, the father goes out there. Hey, that was it. I mean, they're all right in the house sitting, and I just, I couldn't even believe it. I just said, wow, but there is truth to that. I mean, and if you have absentee fathers or, no fathers in the house, you're going to lack that discipline as well. And again, you think, well, no kid wants to be disciplined by his father. But the discipline agent is just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the respect that that child has for his father, and the desire that child has to be respected by his father. Yes, he wants to be loved by his father, but he also wants to be respected by his father. And the thought of being, shamed, to the father is really very humiliating for a child. And so I think, the father, yes, he has the disciplinary role, and that's very important for the guiding hand, but also the respect of the father is longed for as much as the love of the mother.
And, that doesn't go away at all in adulthood. Adults long for, especially men, the respect of their father.
Oh, yeah. And I've seen it where, you see cases of divorce where the father has, been out of the house for a long time, and that boy child will do anything to reconnect with that father, even though he might have been somebody who was very violent toward the child or very disrespectful toward the child. There is this desire, even in the adult child, to go back and reconnect with that father to get his respect. And, I worked in a Jesuit boys' home when I was at Georgetown University teaching there. And we had our own little boys' home that was there. And the state always allowed, boys to go home, to their dads for their parents, for birthdays and things. And, that kid, there was nothing, even though the prospect there could be a beating, there probably was never going to be a present, a card, or a cake, that's for sure. And yet that child, you could not keep him away, especially the boy children, from the father, even if there was abuse in that family. It just always amazed me.
It points to our deep-seated desire to please God, our Heavenly Father, to have this connection to Him, to not just follow in His footsteps, but to be loved by Him, to say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You think about it twice. God intervenes while Christ is on earth and says, this is my beloved son. He's affirming Christ. And what's so incredible is Christ in his humanity needed that information. In his divinity, he did not need it. But in his humanity, he needed that affirmation. And should we not look to the example of God, the Heavenly Father, of that affirmation that we too should be showing?
Yeah, and I think all of us want, not just to be in the good graces of our Heavenly Father, but to also be respected by our Heavenly Father in the sense of, not in the sense of, that God could disdain anybody, right. But that we want, our Father to be proud of us or to be happy with us or to be, our Heavenly Father, to be proud of us and happy with us, just as we want our earthly Father to be proud of us and happy with us. It's we do want to please God just like we want to please our own parents because we do long for their both their love and their respect.
Mm-hmm. I think in bringing this full circle, we see this decline in population. We see the debate over abortion. We see the truth of what was said at the Golden Globes, and then we see this satire study about children. It points to the reality that we need to work on this virtue of goodness in our culture, especially parents to their children, to help foster goodness. Well, that goodness starts with we ourselves showing that love, showing that respect for the child by disciplining them, by being present. Oh, yeah.
And I think self-sacrificial love is the real, as Jesus pointed out to us, that's the epitome of goodness, right, is self-sacrificial love, and that's what parents have. And the reason that children are being marginalized in this society is because self-sacrificial love is being sacrificed to materialism.
That's Father Robert Spitzer of the Magis Center. You can find more about him and his work at the Magis Center by going to www.magiscenter.com. That's MAGIS, magiscenter.com. And thanks for being with us. If you've enjoyed the show, let us know. Head over to radiotrending.com.
This has been Trending with Timmerie. To book her to speak or learn more about her guests, visit radiotrending.com. You can listen to more of Trending via the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or the iHeartRadio app, where you can share your favorite episodes.